Have you ever noticed when you're maybe walking through somewhere that has something like a spring meadow, when everything seems to be teeming with all kinds of new life, that amidst it all, there was actually a lot of death going on, like a frog eating an insect, or that mushrooms next to the meadow were growing out of a decaying log, and then all of those nutrients were dissolving into the soil, which then later was creating this lush grass out of the meadow. Like somehow all of this new life was completely dependent on all of the death happening within it. Because my name's Brandy, and I want to welcome you to This Plus That. This is a show about connecting the seemingly unconnectable and why it matters. And we're about to get existential and really kind of poetic here, because today I talk with Dr. Andreas Weber about the intersections of love plus death. He believes that love and death are tied together at the umbilical, two sides of the creativity of life. And in this conversation, we explore what it means for death to become real in our own bodies, why we're in a century-long struggle to ignore death, and how this ignorance robs us of a deep, meaningful existence filled with the love that lies behind it all. Dr. Weber is a Berlin-based book and magazine writer and independent scholar. He has degrees in marine biology and cultural studies, having collaborated with theoretical biologist Francisco Varela in Paris. Andreas's work focuses on a reevaluation of our understanding of the living. He proposes to understand organisms as subjects, and hence the biosphere as a meaning-creating and poetic reality. Accordingly, he holds that an economy inspired by nature should not be designed as a mechanistic optimization machine, but rather as an ecosystem which transforms mutual sharing of matter and energy in a deepened meaning. He's contributed extensively to developing the concept of enlivenment in recent years, notably through his essay, Enlivenment Towards a Fundamental Shift in the Concepts of Nature, Culture, and Politics, and many, many other places you can read about in his official bio in the show notes of this episode. I have followed his work for around 5 years now. So this is a conversation that meant a lot to me. It's something I never would have dreamed actually happening. Like one of those things where you read and incorporate someone's texts into your life as authors, and they've just truly shaped who you've been over the last few years. And then all of a sudden you have this excuse to talk to them. And so I think you'll find that this is an incredibly connected, meaningful conversation that we both have. And because we talk for 2 hours, I want you to know a little bit more about what we talk about. And we start really by talking about how one of his books helped me fall back in love with the world a handful of years ago. The first time we both remember death becoming real in our lives, not just conceptually, but somatically. How our world is in that century-long struggle against death. The physical experience of aliveness, what biology has to say about purpose, how you can't just be concerned with your own aliveness at the expense of others in your community, what fermentation, my obsession, and composting have to do with community and healthy ecosystems, how Andreas is trying to make himself more edible, how he's leaning further into animistic thinking, the challenge of institutionalizing these ideas at scale, and how we might quote unquote organize aliveness, and how he practices love in his life practically. A few notes before we get going. Fecundity is something that he mentioned, and I wanted to just define that in case you don't know that word. And it's the ability to produce an abundance of offspring or new growth, or the ability to produce many new ideas. And just like in my conversation with David Epstein, we talk about generalists, which are folks who tend to do many things and not just specialize in one thing. And I think it's worth sticking around for this whole conversation, because I, at some point, forced him to tell me about what he believes is behind all of the aliveness, behind the world. You know, is that God? Is it some sort of mystical energy? What is that? And what does he have to say about that after all of this research and aliveness? And there's also some Italians that show up in the background, and a church bell and things like that I left in, because I I think that makes it more real, and you can tell what's going on in our actual conversation. And there's just one little glitch in the internet about 20 minutes in, so you'll hear a pause there. But otherwise, I'm going to stop rambling and let you get to this incredible conversation I had with Dr. Andreas Weber about the intersections of love plus death. I've been starting off all of these conversations by quoting someone else who I think relates to your work. And, you know, I mentioned I was listening to another podcast interview of yours this morning, in which I actually heard you say something to the effect of how in your work, you're actually, of course, drawing on a long lineage of thought, right? You're just continuing sort of a long conversation of what's already been happening and trying to pull together threads, common threads that you see happening, of course. And I think that's part of how I do this. I like to start them with quotes from other people because I think it helps almost even in an audio recording that I'm literally creating connections between each of the conversations, right? And so I wanted to start with a Wendell Berry quote. Are you familiar with Wendell Berry?
Absolutely, yes.
I would assume so, given what you talk about in the world. And Wendell Berry, of course, for those who don't know, is the American farmer, environmental activist, writer, poet, that sort of thing. So in his book, The Art of the Commonplace, which is just a collection of many of his essays, there's a part where he says, "I'm not against technology so much as I am for community. When the choice is between the health of a community and technological innovation, I choose the health of the community. I would unhesitatingly destroy a machine before I would allow the machine to destroy my community. I believe that the community, in the fullest sense, a place and all its creatures, is the smallest unit of health, and that to speak of the health of an isolated individual is a contradiction in terms." And he goes on about a paragraph later and says, "What I'm arguing against here is not complexity or mystery, but dualism. I would like to purge my own mind and language of such terms as spiritual, physical, metaphysical, and transcendental, all of which imply that the creation is divided into levels that can be readily peeled apart and judged by human beings. I believe that the creation is of one continuous fabric, comprehending simultaneously what we mean by spirit and what we mean by matter." So,
fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
I try to write it, to note it down all, but you need to send it to me.
Absolutely.
I don't remember this particularly, but it's brilliant. Yeah.
I felt like that was a perfect place to start, not the least of which is because the way that I came to your work is because I had been, at the time, it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, I'd been working with a friend of mine in the Carbondale Valley, which is an old farming community valley in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. And she was putting together this project that was this symbiotic, relationship between a restaurant, a hotel, and a farm that she was building all in one place that would all feed each other appropriately. And she, of course, was, because if you know Wendell Berry's work, it just makes sense for someone who's into that sort of thing to know Wendell Berry. But she had introduced me to Wendell Berry, and partly because she had been hearing me struggle with the idea of being a generalist when I didn't have a term for what a generalist was instead of a specialist. And Wendell Berry talks a lot about that. But when I read Art of the Commonplace, it was probably right before or right after the election in the US of Donald Trump in 2016. And as someone who had been involved in a lot of racial justice issues and community organizing and such, and also someone, of course, who I think around my age, which at the time was probably around 35, everyone around me was starting to freak out. We were having all these conversations about climate collapse. And I had friends who were considering, not having children because they were afraid that, what kind of world were they birthing someone into? And so there wasn't just a fear about climate. There was also, I think, this real fear of how we might die in a protest or, there was just a growing sense of our death is real. And I was so, while I think I tend to be someone who appreciates death, and what it means, I feel like that might have been the first time I really grappled with my own real death. And when I read Wendell Berry, An Art of the Commonplace, it felt like it helped me realize that death is part of the system.
Yeah.
And right after that, you know, I had been really grappling with, as I was existing in these organizing communities and doing racial justice work, I found myself to be constantly angry. I was just angry all the time at the state of the world and the people in it and all the brokenness that I saw. And I felt it in my body. And I felt this sense that it just wasn't sustainable for me. And I had no idea what to do, because I knew that I cared about being involved in what was going on in the world, of course, but I had to take a real step back. And all I knew how to ask myself or to tell myself that my project was to learn how to fall back in love with the world. And right at that time, Seth, my friend who was creating that farm, restaurant, hotel situation, had heard from a reporter somewhere, I think near Aspen, near Carbondale, where she was doing the project, about Matter and Desire and Erotic Ecology, your book. And so Seth told me about that.
Interesting, yes.
Yeah.
These that's, for me as an author, that's interesting. For me as an author who is not an American, a native language American writer, so it's interesting to understand these enigmatic and brilliant and surprising ways where this book is traveling. Yeah, fantastic. Thanks.
Right. Yeah, its own little life, right? How it weaves its little tendrils through all of our lives. And this is a long personal story, but the end of it is really just that I think, you know, like I said, Wendell Berry gave me that sense that death is part of the system. And then when I read Matter and Desire, I think particularly there's a part, especially in thinking about climate collapse in that book, where you sort of talk about how on the clock of the world that we're not at 5 till midnight, right? We're more at like 3 p.m. And so we can't just sort of, you know, nihilistically throw everything in the air and just be hedons and do whatever we want. We have to figure out what it is to engage at 3 p.m. And your response to that was so helpful for me, and sort of going, not only is it love, you know, fall back in love with the world, but also love is an act of participation. You know, it's not a feeling. And that even in imminent danger or collapse, if that's what's happening, the point is not to solve it. The point is to participate in what's happening. And so I think that's really fitting, because what I think a lot we're going to talk about today are the intersections of love and death. And that was, for me, such a through line between Wendell Berry's work and then coming to read Matter and Desire, where I fell back in love even in the face of death. Yeah,
thank you. It's a good place to start or to dwell, and it's very thinking around these terms is very prominent in my actual own thinking right at the moment. And so let's do this. And I mean, I really understand. I can relate to your feeling of death becoming real for you, like palpably real. Not only, I mean, it can be somehow become conceptually real, but death as something which is awaiting you and which is awaiting every living being, but which is also awaiting me, like truly. That's really a visceral experience. So it's nothing you can do only conceptually. And I know this experience, and I really can relate to it. And I also know this experience as a sort of constant. It's in a way, it doesn't go away in myself, as this world is truly undergoing this transformation, which means that the world we know it is about to die. And so it's really real, and I can't make it go away. So it's always there. So this feeling is very, graspable and very present. Yeah, absolutely. So I really think I know what you're talking about, and it's interesting to hear you locate it in space and time in your life, relating to the election, to the 2016 election, and as I've been traveling through California in that year and meeting friends, and discussing the possibility of this becoming real, and they wouldn't believe it. And I kind of had the feeling like traveling through rural California and filling the car at gas stations and just getting the feeling of, okay, so this might really be an option. So yeah, thanks, but just for locating this a little bit more deeply. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think, right, like so much of what you write about is that all these thoughts, like scientifically, biology, all of those things, they exist in relationship. They don't become real until they're in the world in relationship with other things. And so, of course, I think, like I said, I think that the concept of death had, of course, always been in me, but until it became a reality that was actually present in my own body, I didn't really have to contend with it. And of course, a lot of what you write about is how much work we do to actually push off the idea of
And I mean, we all do it. And we all do it because it's human. So it's or let's say it's even related to, it's even logically built into life itself, or into the experience of life by a living being itself, that as we try to make ourselves flourish as this prime movement of life creating more of itself, just logically, system logically, it's clear that death is something which is postponed because it somehow hasn't something to do with expanding or unfolding, although it in the depth of it very much has to do with it. But so I think it's actually related to it's in every manifestation of life, that in this manifestation of the experience of being alive, in a way, death is far away, but then if you just look behind the mirror, it's there, like in a freshly flowering meadow. In a way, it's the antithesis to death. It's sort of like spring. It's blossoming. It's this expanding motion, the smell. So you feel very much alive in this. But then if you just look into it, if you bow down, if you start to dig, whatever, if you just go deeper into it, then you realize that it's so much linked with death, and with individuals dissolving into other individuals, that you could also call it the flowering of the blossoming of death. But I mean, in the moment of experience, it's not there, and so we in a way we have to work towards this, to work towards containing this as a part of the world we're in. And that's where I started, actually. That was a long detour. So our world is inside a century-long struggle against death as a concept and as an experience and as a reality in the world. So I'd say the idea of Western society, of Western capitalistic society, has been to escape death. There's a great book you probably know. I quoted a lot from this Ernest Becker, The Denial of Death, a U.S. psychologist who is really deeply thought about this, and I'd say that one of the main tasks of, well, at least my life, is to embrace death, and to make myself really not only ready for it, but really accepting the need of death in creation, in making things being born, and just to add a little anecdote into it. So I'm actually thinking, growing older, so we should kind of try to start to walk towards this and somehow not only accepting it, but just embracing it in terms of making our life and the whole life fuller and more real, because that's what is needed to happen, that we give ourselves back into this fertile biosphere or fertile sphere of sense and meaning also. And once I asked, not too long ago, actually, I asked an elderly friend of mine, and she's really old. She's over 80, and she has a lot of illnesses, and she's also a philosopher. And I asked her how that feels to be so close to death. And I really wanted to know, how does that feel? You're so close to it, so you somehow, maybe you see more of it. And she was so absolutely angry with me that I dared to ask this question. So I made her mortal by asking this question. And she obviously didn't want to be mortal. So she obviously was not at the point, or at least she was at that point of time. She wasn't at this point you have been talking about. And she somehow wanted to push it away and say, no, let's not talk about death. And let's not talk about my death in the first place. Let's talk about it conceptually. But I mean, let's see how far I'll come. But I mean, I'm in a way, so that's where, this is why your question is very welcome. So I'm kind of like working through it all the time, but that's something I somehow expect from myself, that I get to a point where I might be sad to go, but not unwilling to give myself back.
Yeah. So that brought up a couple of things for me. One is I think what you talk about is the Enlightenment's project of trying to ignore death, or push away death. But first, I think I would love actually to dig into that more personal piece of, number one, I think, what is really present for you, or do you have an anecdote where death actually sort of dropped into your body, your own death? And even though that's a living question for you right now, of course, it's an ongoing thing, but is there something like me where there was you in a point in space and time encountering that and having to grapple with that? And then also where, this might be a bigger question, but where these connections actually started for you. Like, I know you have a long line of mentors and people that you've, studied under, of course, but I think I sort of mean it in the same way, that as much as maybe you studied under people, when was it that these connections actually came into your body and your physical experience of the world?
Yeah, it's actually a good way to ask a question. Not only ask the question, but say, when did this experience come into your body? Because only then it starts to be real. Otherwise, we're just talking about it, and we're not even sincerely talking about it. We're just saying things about it we have others heard saying about them. Right. Yeah, I need to think a little bit about it, and maybe I'll work my way towards it, because I don't have a fixed narrative of that, and I mean, on the one hand, so there's a very much there's a strand of all this. It's not the only one. So let's start by this, which is actually coming from a philosophical conceptual side. Thinking about life brings you quickly to a point where you realize that there is something in life which is intrinsically struggling for more life or desiring more life. And there's also a side to it which is pulling it down, like exhausting all your energy will make your matter fall down and rest and becoming chemically inert. So just thinking about life brings you to the point where you have to admit a sort of dialectics or polarity. So it's also a philosophical question,
of course.
And how do bodies, how do cells which are made of these things which, if they're not in a cell, just lie around and decompose, or not even, they're just dust. And then they're in a cell and they are part of this ongoing self-realization. So it's a profound philosophical question. So that's one part of it. But then for sure, there is a personal part of it, and which made me put so much death into this book, which is so much about life. and I wrote it when I broke free from several restraining settings or behaviors in my own life. So once my marriage broke down, or I helped it break down, which was causing a lot of toxic pain for my kids as well in the setting in which we were. Mm-hmm. And then I had to understand my choices, which had led me there. And I also had to, and that was somehow in the same batch of things to digest. I had to think about my professional choices. So how would I be able to write about topics which were really important for me? And it broke down somehow to how to be real, how to be truly, really what I feel I am and I need to do, and I need to take from the world and I need to give from the world. So it was very much a struggle about my personal truth or trueness. And then the mother of my kids started this so you won't see your kids anymore thing, which then became a very existential menace. So that was a sort of death inflicted from, or not, it wasn't death actually. So, but yes, it was death. So I needed to die through this. Yeah, I mean, death is, and that's something we've forgotten in the West, that it's not an end, it's a passage. Right. And so we're actually dying lots of deaths in our lives, and sadly, many of them we don't need to die if we died other deaths, the right deaths. So many of us we're just spinning in this kind of relentlessly reoccurring senseless death of which is actually just toxic pain, and we should die other deaths and let go of things which keep us somewhere where we don't belong. So just to finish this anecdote. Or this part of my life story. So I really I was in that situation where I had to decide if I struggled for what I felt was the right thing to do, or if I somehow sit in the corner and suffer. And I decided to struggle. And but then first things became harder, and then they became clearer, and stuff settled, and dust settled, and the water wasn't that murky anymore. So it was a period of intense transformation, actually, which wasn't related to physical death. So there was no illness or any death occurring in my life, or a near death like this. But he said it doesn't need to be organic in order to be felt as death. And and so I thought a lot about trauma and all these things that you find in that book as well. And so it was very personal. And I emerged changed, absolutely. So I still vouch for that. And I still know that I really do things differently. Not everything, but some important things. And somehow I've taken on, and I think I've not really, I haven't become untrue to this idea that to my vow to embrace the necessary deaths, which is actually what I told you before about getting older and older, and starting to prepare yourself to embrace this necessary death.
Yeah. I think too, part of me wanted to ask that question because I know you tell this story in Matter and Desire and other places that is the moment sort of when joy dropped into your body, which is that story about letting, finding the swift and your friend's chimney and touching it and releasing it and letting it go and feeling its heartbeat and feeling the joy that came off of it, for you at least, when you can't know exactly what it experienced, but you knowing that you experienced that joy. And then you shared that with your friend. I was just curious too, if there was a moment at which you had where, death sort of dropped into your body. But I think the other anecdote that I have that is just so tied into your work and Matter and Desire in particular is, related to something you said, again, I guess like going back to the Enlightenment and this idea that for the last 100 or so years that you say that the concepts that have dominated our world are the struggle for existence, competition, growth, optimization, things like forcing and control and that sort of thing. And for me, I've always been sort of, I think as a person, like I said earlier, who really resonated with the idea of generalists, and which is really part of why I started this podcast, was in order for me to grapple with these dual things in my own self, right? To create a container where these things that were seemingly unrelated actually could have a container, not where they got resolved, but where I could hold them in tension. And, being a generalist, I've always been sort of a floaty, work is an interesting thing for me because it's never been a through line. I never have done one thing really, and I've often hopped around jobs. And in, right around the time when I was working on that farm, restaurant, hotel project, I was employed at this place, sort of in and out, full-time, contract work, that sort of thing. But I stayed there for a period of about 3 years. And in the midst of that, I got introduced to this course that was being taught at a university here, the School of Mines, the Colorado School of Mines, that I was told I could audit. And I've told this story. This is for me sort of like your Swift story. I will probably tell it in almost everything I tell, because it was like this sort of genesis for a lot of things. But I audited this class. It was taught by a quantum physicist and a poet. His name's Lincoln Carr. I've had him on also to record a discussion with him. And it was amazing. And the real story that relates to Matter and Desire and what I was reading in that at that time was that, it was like truly my first embodied example of what aliveness meant, because I would go to work every day at this job that I was good at and that, I enjoyed generally. I didn't love it. If I had any chance to not have to do it, I would have loved that. But, in that moment in doing it, I didn't hate it, but it just wasn't, I knew I would leave work every day and I would feel drained, even though it was easy for me and that sort of thing. But then, this class was in the middle of a work week, and I had to travel across town to go get to it. And it was a 4-hour long class to go sit in that I was auditing. It wasn't even for credit for me. It was truly out of just pleasure and joy and curiosity. And I had been on sort of this, multi-year experience of learning that after a lifetime of being told that I was just an artist and not really a scientist, because I was never really that good at math or science, I started to realize how deeply poetic science was, basically. And so I started to read people like Carlo Rovelli and, quantum physicists who were talking about the poetry of science and physics and that sort of thing. But so that led me to that class, and I'd been on a multi-year, experiment and what it would mean for me to dip my toes into science as someone who's mostly been in arts and a humanitarian, humanities person for so long. Anyway, so I go to this class and I just have this recollection of, leaving in the middle of the work week from a job that had drained me, and then traveling to this 4-hour class in the middle of work week and coming back home at 10 p.m. our time and being so full of energy, I felt like I could run around the block. I was literally physically enlivened by the experience of this class. And for me, it said something about not just being in relationship with other people, but that we are in relationships also with our work. And after so many listeners, just know that the talking in the background of the Italians is just going to continue to happen, and that's totally fine. I'm not going to edit it out. So it made me question not just, do my relationships bring me alive, but does my work bring me alive? And Robin Wall Kimmerer, who I was also reading at the time, which makes sense because she's in that same line of thought, has something in, I think, Braiding Sweetgrass that says something like, I love the earth, but does the earth love me back? Mm-hmm. And it sort of forced me into this place of going, okay, I don't necessarily love my work, but can I love my work? And also, can my work love me back? Meaning I realized for the first time in my own body that I was in relationship with the work that I did in the world. And there was something real about the experience of finding work that brought you alive. And aliveness at that moment became a compass for me that I could actually operationalize aliveness because I could feel it in my own body. And so I could start to go, does this relationship bring me alive? Does my work bring me alive? Does this food I'm eating bring me alive? And where I think a lot of times I have a hard time, like a lot of people, sort of conceptualizing what it means to be happy. Aliveness was a physical experience that I could gauge in real time, that my body was answering me back, yes or no, this does or doesn't bring you more life. And so it became a guiding compass for me, especially I think in my work, where I started to realize, I think to your point, to sort of wrap that back in, what you just said is, even though, I think there's a sense of when we avoid death, we're actually inviting it. Because I continue to push it away so much that it deadens my experience of the world. And so though I'm not dead and I think I'm trying to do my best to survive, which is what capitalism and enlightenment and all those things teach us about competition and struggle for existence and growth and optimization and efficiency and all of those things, I started to go, well, what if the universe actually wants me to be alive? And what would that look like? How would that guide how I work in the world? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thanks. So thanks a lot for continuing the work I started in the book. As you obviously in a very sensitive and attentive way live this through your embodied existence. And I think I didn't even go so far in that book to describe it like this, or like you described it. And it absolutely makes sense. And I think that's very much how I do things, actually. And it's even something I cannot switch off anymore. So I'm also doomed. So in a way, if I realize that something does not make me alive, or is seriously kills my aliveness, it's not something I can push away anymore. So I need to find a solution. I mean, we all know that there might be necessary things, and even necessary in a good sense, things which are very unpleasant, but that's different. That's something different. Mm-hmm. And it's actually a compass for toxicity. We are able to find. It might not be always easy to get there, and we might some initiatory experiences to get there. So something needs to be lit, or somebody needs to be contagious with life. But I think actually it's actually easy because every living being has this, because in the logic, and now you see, as I did in the book, I'm kind of doing this stepping back and forth between between experiential phenomenological explanation and a little bit biological biophilosophical reasoning. But if a being wants to keep on existing, so if it wants to keep itself, herself or himself alive, it needs to have an experience of what this is. So it's absolutely logical that we can feel this, and we should head into the direction. And it's wrong to go against it because we're going against something which is built into our constitution of living beings. And I mean, the interesting question then comes when we follow this compass, and then we need to find solutions for all the sort of new direction it's giving new directions it's giving us, because then we're kind of culturally or socially challenged, because you can't bulldoze in a straight way following your aliveness. It doesn't work. And I mean, it's also not how it works in ecosystems. But as you probably have realized, then one sees how many changes would be needed to put human togetherness back on an aliveness footing. We're kind of far away from this.
Yes, indeed. I also don't know if you've read, speaking of, no longer being able to operate outside of alive, if that's your compass, if aliveness becomes your compass, how hard it is then when you feel not alive to then make life choices that bring you anything short of that. Resonates for me, also reminds me of Audre Lorde's work, The Uses of the Erotic, of course. Yeah. She talks about how once you've tasted the erotic, it's impossible basically to settle for anything else. And then the other thing it brings up for me, do you know the work of Charles Eisenstein?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I know both, and I really admire Audre Lorde. I also like Charles' work very much, and I mean, I learned Audre Lorde's. I knew her work later than Charles's work, and that was really a light in the darkness for me to discover her stuff. That was really, really great. And sorry, but I interrupted you.
No, it's totally fine. I asked a question, so it was fine. But yeah, I joked recently, I think on Twitter, that, I don't know why I ever read anything other than Uses of the Erotic. It's basically all I ever need to read in order to, set that compass for every day of my life. It's so short and succinct, but so powerful. But I only recently came into knowing the work of Charles Eisenstein because I have friends who know him. Yeah. And it's funny because I read Matter and Desire 4 or 5 years ago. And just recently coming into Charles's work, he talks about so many similar things, like that, what we experience internally is really gets reflected in the external world, but really vice versa, that the external is a reflection of our internal world. But more than that, I think I've really been diving into his stuff. I've been taking his course, Living in the Gift. And it is that project that you talk about in terms of what it means to operate then, that you can't just bulldoze through your life when you're using aliveness as a compass, because really it's a state of being in constant relationship to whatever's going on currently for you, and making choices out of that, and not being able to know and control what's coming next. And even beyond that, it's often a state of both gratitude and living in the gift, that in order to live almost your most alive self, you come to this natural place, I think, of realizing it's that idea of the commons, right? That we are all in constant reciprocity with each other. And last night I was reading back through portions of the sort of latter half of Matter and Desire and realizing how much you talk about the gift. And I had completely forgotten that part of it from, when I read it a few years back, and you were talking about a lived experience of starting to embody trust, what it was to trust that the world was going to meet your needs, and that what what you needed to survive, rather than forcing, the sense of control we have around how we're going to make money, how we're going to survive in the world, how we're going to have relationships that sustain us, that sort of thing. It was, I think all of us sort of coming to this natural place of going, oh, in order to be most alive, I actually have to let go of a notion of controlling all those things and actually start to live in wild generosity and gift and just trust.
Yeah. Now it's actually nice that you remind me of that latter part of the book, because when I wrote it, I was in a different mood than when I wrote let's say the first half of it, or the first 2/3. When I wrote the last third, where I'm talking about the gift. But I wrote it with that feeling of really having been given an insight. So it was very much it was a very good experience to do this, and to understand that actually, I say understand, to have the experience or the insight that our plain existence is already continuously the reception of a gift, and every sensual encounter is actually being gifted by something, and then you can again break it down to a biological argument, which then becomes very profound, and on a phenomenological or experiential or spiritual level. And I mean, we talked about this this experience when death is necessary in order to live what you are, but what you are is actually not something which is objectively true in a way, but it is also something which has been given to you. So I think it's a very profound reality. And it's also seeing the world as an exchange of gifts. And it's also a reality which older cultures have kept as the default for understanding the world, that at the beginning was a gift. And we are receivers of gifts, and we need to be givers of gifts. And for one, because only gifts keep the cosmos fertile, but on the other hand, because we want to give gifts. I mean, that's to me and I think it's part of that last third of the book. That's to me, that's always such an amazing experience, that when I receive something, and I mean, I'm talking about this daily mode of mine of being in the world and receiving its fecundity or its beauty, which is still there, although it's so menaced, and then it immediately arouses in me the need to give something back. So that's probably the reason why I'm writing books, or I'm writing articles or essays, or I'm writing, because I feel the need of giving an echo, of putting into form something which came to me through this experience, or you could also say through this other being who gifted me with that in that moment. For example, here in Italy in the summer, or in the meadows, as I'm in the Apennines, I'm a little bit higher. I'm not at the coast, and there are these beautiful wild meadows and forest fringes, and there are these extremely colorful moths, which are called burnets. They're like tiny moths. They're not that very big, and they have extremely lush colors, like a dark blue with crimson spots on their wings. Wow. So they're absolute jewels, and they're flying around somehow slowly because they know they are indigestible, and birds know they're indigestible because they have already thrown up every one of them once, and then they don't eat them anymore, and it's just like a really experience. Walking there, I experienced this as being showered with light, which is a gift which is gifted to me, and then I can't help but wanting to give back. And that's and then in my case, it's focusing on writing about this and making way also to see it, to experience it more from that angle, and not only from the angle of seeing it as a manifestation of successful efficiency. Now you hear probably the church bell. Yeah, it will ring twice. It does it 2 minutes to the hour and 2 minutes or 3 minutes after it, and that this has to do with a certain flexibility in being at time. On time, it's yes. You're already there's no now it is 8 o'clock. It's kind of 8 o'clock.
We're somewhere near 8 o'clock.
Yeah, near or like slightly after. So it's blurred. It's in a way. It's somehow. It's not a point. It's a zone. It's the 8 o'clock zone. Okay, that was a little detour.
Yeah. I think. Well, first of all, yes, I'm just going to, the word you used, I'll echo back to you that I think in my experience of sort of using aliveness as a compass in my world, that I think the more that I've leaned into that and the more that I've leaned into living out of a gift and gratitude and all of those things, that there's this experience I have of compulsion, like almost like the enlivenment it creates in me is so big, it's hard to just keep it in my body. I feel compelled to share it out. And for me, similarly, a lot of times that's either this sort of speaking or it's writing it and putting it, like you said, into some sort of form that other people can then digest and chew on and, work with and continue the conversation. But the other thing I feel like that it's just so present for me is wondering like what, like I said, a lot of this has really guided then, of course, what I do with my work and how in the world. And, there's something else I love from Charles. He says something to the effect of like, we become that which we create. And I think you even talk about that some in Matter and Desire, that literally like the work that we do in the world actually influences our cellular biology. So all of the relationships are constantly affecting each other. And so I literally become the work I do in the world at a physical, biological level in some ways. And so in sort of pursuing that path, I have this question, I think, about how you would describe what biology has to say about purpose. What is it, either both collectively as a species, are humans here for a particular purpose? I think sort of expanding on that too, that, when you talk about biology, that like, and desire, you talk about matter and desire, of course, so that like atoms have a desire to join together and become something more. And then molecules have a desire to come together and become something more. And I have this sort of ongoing question is like, what is it that at a species level, humans have a desire to come together? What is the more that we want to create in the world? And so I'm sure that there's something about how our work individually reflects that too. But I think, especially for me, like the questions I'm sitting with are then what does biology have to tell me about my own purpose in the world? And whether or not, I'm going to guess before you even give me a response. I was telling this to a friend yesterday. So I was in conversation with her and we were talking about all these like sort of tensions in our own life. And I was like, I think I want to ask Andreas about this. And sort of this idea of purpose and how I've been thinking about it lately. And my guess is that I think there's something at a biological level that, of course, like even as individuals, that we have been imbued with a particular purpose in our experience of being here in the world. But that, of course, that purpose is always lived out in relationship with everything we encounter, our relationships, our work, where we live in the world, geography, that sort of thing, what we eat, all of that. So that we might have an inherent sense of purpose biologically, but then we're also put into the world and that influences how we operate. But now that I've just spoken at you all these things. What would your response be?
The easiest thing for me now would be to say, yeah, you're right. And you put it so nicely.
But
it wouldn't help you for the purpose of this blog. So I'll elaborate on that. No, I start with a thought I had when you were talking before about aliveness as a compass to be a part of something bigger unfolding. So in my years with that idea, I realized that it can also be something which can lead you on a wrong track. So because you can be so enthusiastic about feeling alive that you don't realize that other parts in yourself or parts in others are overridden by that ecstasy of yourself. So aliveness is something which is not individualistically only in yourself, but it's also part of a shared network of something which I mean I kind of would call the aliveness of the world, but in recent times I use the word fecundity as something which is blossoming, but also having a potential to yield more of this, and so that's something which is shared, and I'd recommend always to check if what we are doing in our aliveness is really nourishing the aliveness of everything and everyone around us. That's very important, that we have this framework of reciprocity, of mutuality in that. And I'm speaking from experience. So I'm speaking from my own experience. And I mean, this is just part of the beauty of the world we're living in, is that that something can, that joy can mislead us. That it's just part of why this earth is so beautiful, because it's not completely ordered, and we need to do this ordering partly by ourselves. I'd say that. So that's an important point, which leads me to the answer of what you said, what you were asking about purpose. Or let's say that leads me to an attempt to answer this, because it, as you already hinted to, it's a kind of night-long conversation which could start from this. And I mean, I'd say let me say as a first shot, and then I explain more deeply. Our purpose is to make the world fecund. That's our purpose. I'd really put it like that strongly. And if we don't do this, we are missing our purpose. And I'd say that if we don't do this, we also feel bad. Most of us. You can grow up, or somebody can grow up in such a horrible way that he or she isn't able to feel this fecundity anymore. So we know sociopathic people. So we know that people can be traumatized in a way that and that's again why I cautioned about just trusting blindly your aliveness, so that they can't really healthily feel what is making others and themselves alive. So then we're misguided. Normally, I'd say that if we contribute to the fecundity of the cosmos, including ourselves, so that's not a dualistic thing. It's not like, okay, now you can decide if you're working for the cosmos or if you're working for yourself and buy you a nice SUV next year. So that's not a choice. So if you're working for the fecundity of the whole, we're working also for ours. But if we do this, we feel right. And we forget about the question for the purpose, because we feel that we don't need to ask, because somehow it's okay. So I'd say that's how I'd start from the top of it, about from the human point of it. And if we go down, to the more biological observations, then I'd say even the Bernard is working for the fecundity of the cosmos in its or his or her way. And by being a part of the, Gary Snyder called it etiquette of freedom, of the reciprocity in the ecosystem, which allows beings to unfold and then to sink again into the whole, and which is making it fecund, which is giving life, which creates life, which, as Robin Kimmerer would put it, makes the cosmos go on forever. And she's a fantastic thinker and writer. Actually, I'm a huge admirer of hers.
Yes,
I'm a really huge admirer of hers. And so stepping one step back more, I'd say that, and I mean, I think even in the last quarter of the book, or in the last fifth, in the penultimate chapter, I think I wrote about this. But I'd say it. I thought more about this, and I'd say it in more definite words probably right now. So I believe that the world is desiring to unfold itself and to experience itself. And to experience itself as being able to give life. So that's built into the substance of the cosmos, which then by this is not only a material substance, but it's also a substance of feeling and desire and let's call it interior experience or subjectivity. Mm-hmm. So this world is actually, as a total, is something which I like to call poetic space. So it's, you said Einsteinian time. So it's something more than just space. It's a space in which meaning is created and experienced for example, us. And so everything what we're doing, and that also echoes something which you said before, everything we're doing is happening to that poetic space of desiring fecundity. And it's only also if we only do it for ourselves, or if it only happens inside ourselves, it also happens in this whole space. So we do it to the whole, to this whole thing. So this is also why we're not. It's also a sense in which we're not separate. Even if we really hide it and we don't tell it anybody, and we manage not even to tell it our best friend forever, it's still there, and it's still changing this. And this is now I'm kind of walking away from your original question, and this is why it's important to keep focus on creating fecundity, even if we're not doing anything concrete with it, even if we're just if it's just about our intentions, or about our dreams, or about what we are thinking, or about what we are focusing on. So because everything changes this space of desire, which takes life and then births life again. And that's something our civilization has absolutely forgotten. This is totally out of fashion. So because our civilization conceives of the world as a completely, utterly material place made of objects. And that's absolutely wrong. So it's a completely idiotic error. I mean, it's systematic ideological blinding of our better intuitions. But I mean, once we're in it and we reproduce it and we're struggling for meaning in this world, which by definition is not able to hold any meaning. I mean, you're asking for, well, what could we say about the purpose of each of us? And you're asking this in front of the background of a world which has been defined and which is defined. And if you go to school and to university, you learn it again and again that it's defined as bleakly dead and objects only. And no wonder.
Maybe
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, blind struggle for being more efficient than the others in order to keep them down or something. Yes,
Right.
And I think it's a major error. It's such a big error that it's now causing a fifth dying event in geohistory, and we're witnesses to it, at least to the beginning. Yeah, but I mean, it will go. This view will go away because it's wrong, and everything which is wrong won't survive.
Yes.
That was a long curly answer, but I think
I actually, the first part of what you said in terms of, considering our purpose and using aliveness as a compass, and not just in our own bodies, but making sure that we're paying attention to how that's also, creating aliveness or not in other people, reminded me, the more I sort of dig into all of these texts and have these conversations, it's just amazing to me that, of course, like we all sort of come to similar, there's threads in there that I think makes sense. And maybe if you don't connect them in real time, of course, it's one of those hindsight is 2020 things that, remarkably or not so remarkably in the last few years, attachment theory has been big in my world in talking about anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, those sorts of things. And I think that to me is where I've really started to be able to understand that all these times when I thought I was really alive, like let's say, like for me, this is really real in relationship, of course. So especially in romantic or dating relationships where I would think, I'm just so excited. This must be aliveness, and really what it actually was an unhealthy attachment to someone else I was looking to fill something else in me. And I think that energetically and biologically, I'm guessing that's just a very different space than what I call actual aliveness. I think, and I can feel that differently in my body, that like there's it's either the sense of, I'm in need of someone else to fill. And so then I have this sense of anxiety and desperation and that sort of thing. But on the other hand, when I feel alive and how I can tell that hopefully I'm also inspiring aliveness in the others that I'm in relationship with is when it actually feels like giving. Like you were saying that when you've been gifted something, and I have, of course, been gifted life and resources and so many incredible things. And when I am in a state of not constantly, the best I can, recognizing a gratitude for that, when I approach other people in relationship, it's coming from a place of sharing out of what I already have, not asking someone to fill something that I lack. Right. So that to me, I think is how I've really, grappled with what it means as I try to practically understand what it is to both be alive myself and more alive and seek aliveness, but also make sure that it's not causing a kind of death of any kind in others. Yeah. Brilliant. I think you really put it brilliantly. And I'm really happy that we are talking about this point. And this is something I feel like making clearer than when I was writing that book, actually, because I went on in my own experiences, and I started to realize that we can't only we can't put all our chips on the feeling of ecstasy, right? Because then it will hurt someone, and I think it will hurt ourselves as well. So if it hurts someone, it hurts ourselves as well. And I think you really said it when you said that. If you really feel alive, you're in a mode of giving, and that means that others around you feel also enlivened by you. So that's what is happening in genuinely enlivening situations with people who are truly alive. They automatically share this with others, and they make others feel like this. And it's very different from the mode of being saved for a moment, and for that reason feeling completely ecstatic. It's very different. And you see, it's again something which you can't
you can't define for only an individual. You need to define it for the whole setting, or for a community, or for interaction. So you can only define it relationally. So you can't really say about a not unrelated individual, is she or he really alive, or does he or she feel really alive? If you don't take into account all the other beings with whom we are in constant relation. And I mean, you could even say in our civilization, if somebody is earning a lot of money and is able to buy a nice house at the waterfront somewhere and whatever, and the kids go to a good school, and he or she might feel really alive, but it's only in this microscopic bubble of hedonism. If you switch off feeling relationships to the broader world, and then you're walking through the next neighborhood and you see that, oh, there's obviously something wrong that I'm just so easily making my living, and you are homeless, or you're walking a little bit farther and you see the state of the barren, whatever, dried out non-human being. So it's something which only can come to its true fruition if it's felt in relationship, and so we need to this is really, it's really important to make it understand in this way. But I think if we I mean, what you said is just the perfect illustration of this. By consciously working through our ways of relating, we arrive at a point where it comes naturally that we want this reciprocity, and we want this sort of collective aliveness, and we're not satisfied anymore with this being just being in this kind of oversweetened state of now everything is okay finally, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so that's so important, that it's something about togetherness.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that made me remember two things. Also, one is that Charles Eisenstein has this video, actually with my friend who knows him, Lauren, where she sort of asks him, look, I've got a philosopher at hand. I want to ask you sort of why are we here? What does it matter?
Yeah.
And it's a video about metaphysics and life. And, Charles is, if I were to unfortunately need to reduce his response to that question down to, a simple sentence, it was something related to fecundity, which was the point of life is more life. We are here to create more life. And the second thing I thought of is, not long after I met Lauren, I watched that video because she and her brother had shared it with me. And after I finished it, or probably even partway through, I was so overcome with that sense of aliveness I had to share. And I stopped the video and I recorded a 20-minute long voice memo on my phone to Lauren, who at the time was just nearly a stranger. And I thought, surely this is going to end our friendship at the beginning, because this is just crazy. But I sent her this 20-minute response, and part of it was talking about both. I read her pieces of Matter and Desire, and I had written sort of similar things that Charles was talking about. But this other thing, which is for me, not long after reading Matter and Desire, probably within 2 or 3 years, I was really having all these health issues, and gut things, depression, stuff that I was starting to see as like a sort of conglomerate of autoimmune conditions. And so again, of course, this is where, for me, these ideas land in my body. They become real in experience. And part of that for me was I had met someone named Asia Dorsey who taught me actually about fermenting. Mm-hmm. And when I watched this video about Charles, I was like, what is so amazing to me, this is going to seem like a non sequitur, but it ties in, is that fermentation for me was a practical example of what it means to put two living things, water, or three, water, salt, and some sort of, material like cabbage or something, into an ecosystem. And that when they're done being in there together, there is literally more life in them than when they started separately. And of course, that to me is a basic idea sort of from permaculture about the idea of regenerative relationships, that it's not just sustainability, which I actually like. There's stuff in Matter and Desire that talks about like the state of the world is really like a steady state thing. But in regenerative relationships, there is more life there than there was before. And it is that sort of commons mentality of reciprocity, and that we're all sort of, you're gauging actually aliveness, not just on your individual experience, but on the state of the ecosystem, and that overall there is more life. But I thought it was so funny because when I was listening to a podcast this morning, that was another one of your interviews, you mentioned being published by Chelsea Green. And I was like, of course. And this will mean nothing to the audience, but because I've done so much fermentation work, they've published so many fermentation books.
Yes.
And I was like, I never even knew that Matter and Desire or your other works were published by Chelsea Green. And it makes a lot of sense to me because all the stuff that I've been doing, I knew of Chelsea Green because of fermentation stuff. And was like, we're all in a similar boat, but fermentation was just such a fun example to me of that practical idea of more life in an ecosystem.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. And in a way, what is happening there, what we are creating by setting up this fermentation reactor or container or jar or whatever kimchi box is in a way it's a sort of microcosmos. So you're creating. You said it. You're creating an ecosystem. I mean the ecosystem is mainly driven by the bacteria inside of it, or some yeasts, maybe some fungi, and but in a very tiny space, you're working with an ecosystem, and it's very interesting. I mean, if fermented produce or food is healthy for ourselves, then it's healthy because it's not a thing. What we are taking, it's a community which is then incorporated into ourselves, who also should be a community. And I mean, that's this thought, that we are absolutely a community already. Every individual is already a huge, incredibly huge community,
right?
And which obviously, even if we are completely unable to sustain this at a given moment in time because of our psychological situation, it sustains itself, and it sustains us, and it creates health and yeah.
I love the metaphor too, because not only is it me existing in a community and ingesting a community, but also scientifically, biologically, the microbes that exist there, number one, are unseen. We can't see them with our eyes, but it doesn't mean they're any less real, which, I think in your sort of poetic senses is the stuff that we consider intangible, but no less are real and valid ways of being in the world. And the other thing is that those microbes actually, in their digestion and creating a fermented product, break down the material in that little ecosystem, that little universe you've created, and they actually make the food more bioavailable to your body. So when you ingest that community, you not only have more life because of the microbes, you're getting more life and nutrition because the microbes have done their job in making those nutrients more available to you. And so then you literally get more life out of eating that one particular thing.
Yeah. Now, I mean,
just my nerdy fermentation.
Yeah, it's complete. I'd say it's biologically completely right. I put it slightly different, to highlight that the important thing is not building blocks of matter, but it's community. It's entanglement. It's reciprocity, and you can't really take away food as chemical compounds from this idea. So if you do this, then you somehow separate it, and I wouldn't separate it. I would say you're feeding your body, who is an ecosystem, with living examples of how you're doing good ecology, and that entices your body to be a better ecosystem. And so I mean, in my thinking, but you can also watch it from a different angle for sure. But in my thinking, I'd say that the good thing about everything which has to do with fermentation in any sort, and then we can talk about composting, which is a sort of reverse fermentation or another form of fermentation.
Right.
It's creating productive interactions, and actually productive interactions are what is feeding us. And I needed some time to translate it back into empirical biotalk, but I'd sustain that actually as an argument, and this is what counts actually, and then we're actually back, if you allow, we're back at the beginning of our talk, because if you see yourself as a community, which loves to be fed by more community and which loves to feed other communities, then slowly the experience of your overtowering ego fades away, and you're starting to be just a momentary manifestation of this community, which is always morphing into other communities, like a murmuration of birds, And I think that's a good way to approach dying, actually. So you're holding this, but you're sort of momentarily manifestation, but then there's so much more layers and other layers which are still parts of experiencing life, which wander through you. And I think it's just amazing. It's just awesome. It's just so lovely, actually.
Well, I love you. You did the work of bringing us back to the beginning about the intersections of love and death. So thank you for doing that. I think that's beautiful. I think the question I would probably end on is, of course, I have probably 300 questions I would prefer to be able to ask. But I think what I would end on is just what are the tensions or questions that you're holding right now? Yeah,
very good. Well, one answer is I'm still working on making myself edible and embracing this wider unity. So that's not something I'd say I'd check the box. It's a sort of day-to-day meditation work. But you're also asking for where are my the threads of my thoughts heading? And what I've been doing in the last time, and what I'm doing right now, is to try to understand cultures who actually build their ways around making life fecund and keeping life fecund on this planet. So I've gone deeply into animistic thinking, and that's again another place where I met Robin Wall Kimmerer and her work and her great work she did for saving animistic thinking from so many bad Western prejudices. So she's really doing an amazing work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm actually trying to somehow put this in more, let's say, how can I put it? Thanks for asking me. So I'm really trying to find words. So I'm probably at the moment trying to somehow institutionalize this and going still farther back from this very personal way of my guidance will be my way of being alive, and looking for cultural ways of which exist and which have been there for hundreds of thousands of years and which are still there, fortunately menaced, but they're still there. understanding the cosmos as completely, purely alive on every level, and learning from them actually. And there's talking about this. There's something which came into my mind a little bit before, and it's a good moment to quote this. It's a quote also by Martin Prechtel. I don't know if you know him.
I don't.
He lived for 20 years with Mayan people and became a shaman there. And he has a lot of books. I can also warmly recommend his work. I really love his work. And he says, again, answering the question of why on earth are there humans? aren't we just this kind of sort of bad pandemic to the biosphere? And he says humans are there because the gods like the beauty we are able to create.
Oof.
Isn't that nice? And I mean, like I like so he again points to the other pole we have been talking about, or which was in our talk, namely love. So we are loved by the gods, or by the spirits, or by the spirit of the whole. Maybe we can also say this, because we are so desperate at creating beauty. And beauty is a form of shining aliveness, I'd say. And again, we are here, and I think it's a very nice description. But then receiving this gift of being wanted because being able of creating beauty, then you need to give back a gift, and you actually need to create beauty. And now we are back at square one, where we need to ask ourselves, okay, so how are we actually going to create beauty in a world that is filled of so much ugliness, and forcing me to somehow comply with this ugliness? So I'm really looking at like in a much more concrete way at ways to how could you call it? I'd said institutionalize, but that's maybe not really good. But to actively build culture on these premises, that's totally fascinating to me at the moment.
Yeah, it's almost like, I mean, of course, it's existing in that complexity of two seemingly unrelated things and seemingly opposing things, which is organizing aliveness.
Yeah.
How does one organize aliveness both in your own life, but also at scale? How do cultures and cities and neighborhoods organize aliveness? And, it is hard to find a word that isn't institutionalized. Or, earlier I said, this is how aliveness has been operationalized for me, which is an uncomfortable tension, because I don't like to put operationalization and, optimization and those sorts of things onto aliveness. But it is nonetheless true that we are constantly figuring out not only how to do it at an individual level, but also it makes sense that you're now looking at that culturally. And I love that's just such a beautiful response. And it made me think, again, using Robin Wall Kimmerer's framing, not only are we questioning, do I love life, but does life love me back? Mm-hmm. And if life loves me back, what is my role within that? And creating more beauty sounds like a pretty interesting pursuit.
Yeah.
Great. Is there anything else that you would want to make sure to mention before we wrap up? That I know that again, we could go on forever, but.
No, I just, let me just tell you, I'm really grateful for this talk. And it made me think about things which somehow were floating around but needed to be thought upon. And I'm also grateful for what you've been sharing and for what have been inspiring me to. Thanks a lot. Yeah. So no, I mean, I didn't have any plans of what I absolutely wanted to tell. So we can stop now, or we could stop later.
Yeah, I mean, it's of course, I feel like whatever someone offers as what they want to talk about, and your offering was love plus death, and also why we need a different understanding of what it means to be alive, and also wanted to mention animism. And it's hard because I find myself in these conversations naturally because they connect to so many other things that we end up talking about stuff that seems like it might not be related to the topic that we're trying to narrow down into one tiny little idea, but I think that love and death and all of those things, and including, why we need a different understanding of what it means to be alive. That was just really real for me, I think, in talking about work in particular and what it means to like sort of live out what we do with our lives, not just in our relationships, but a huge majority of
just in order to spend some more time and just a little, if I have the time. Do I have the time?
I'm here as long. Listen, I'm here as long as you want to talk. I just want to be respectful of your time.
Yeah, no, but and your day just started, and my day. Probably you can see the changing light darker. Now it's. I switched on the lamp like secretly before. No, but I wanted to say just again, maybe if I didn't. I think I didn't insist on it in this way, that death needs love and love needs death. So we can't have one of them without the other. They're absolutely bound together at the umbilicals. And as you see, that's something which is our mainstream absolutely doesn't see and doesn't understand. And I think only by bringing those together, and our explorations tonight or this morning in your time zone have contributed a little bit to bring those together again. Only by bringing those together again, I think we can continue to live in reality and to keep reality a place which loves to give. It's absolutely essential. So these seemingly incompatible polar opposites are actually two sides of the creativity of life. And I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm turning back to these older cultures, because they absolutely knew this, and they had their rituals for this, and they had a very non-sentimental way of dealing with this. Because if you accept death as a center of existence, you just need to stop being sentimental in the sense of secretly hoping that everything will be good, because it can't, because there's death in the center. But it doesn't mean that it's totally wickedly bad either. It can be very sweet, but transitory. And I'd say it's like this. I say this also with the greeting from Italy, where life is particularly sweet, but it's also very transitory. And it's so that's sort of the particular contribution from aliveness to aliveness from this standpoint. But it holds generally, and I really think that we need to find ways to live this again, to incorporate this again. And I'm still very much searching here. Yeah. There was another thing I wanted to add, but it slipped. So
maybe it will come back to you. I was going to say, when I was going back and reading more of Matter and Desire again, I was going to joke to you that it would have been more efficient for me to underline the things I didn't find compelling than the things that I did, because almost the entire book is underlined. It's sort of ridiculous, but
it also becomes confusing for yourself then.
Right.
Yes.
It's when everything is everything. There's no grounding point. Yeah. But it was just sort of amazing to me. I had forgotten really how much, because obviously it's probably obvious at this point, like aliveness was the concept that really resonated with me coming out of reading it. But it was incredible to me to go back and realize how much you talk about love plus death. And I was like, I don't even know where to begin, sort of quoting back to him all the things that he says about these interconnections between love and death, from relationships to, biology and cellular level things, and just how much that is the state of the world. So I could pick up your book and read a million quotes, but I think mostly I just want people to read it. But, I think part of me also just wonders from a personal level, if we're going to sort of combine the idea of operationalizing or making practical or institutional or whatever those things are, these sort of intangible things, how is it that you practice love with like yourself, your relationships, even also like how you practice. Part of what I wanted to answer, and I feel like I sort of shot myself in the foot by using that Wendell Berry quote at the beginning, which was about like how we don't want to define, he wants to get rid of the ideas of like a separation of spirit and matter and faith and metaphysics and all those things. But I still am so interested in knowing like how you define what that is. Like what is the aliveness behind the world, and how are you in practice of engaging with whatever that is? Is it prayer? Is it some sort of faith tradition? Is it, just really your relationships? How does that live out in your world? These are two questions actually. And they're both great. Yeah. Let me try to answer them, and then we stop. And I'm going to, it's you could also have started by asking me this. It's right, but it's also a very it's also a question maybe you need some windows open before you ask it. So I think it sort of has to wait till the end, because I think it's a little hard to begin with a total stranger level. Yeah, absolutely. I mean that's more what a successful journalist would do, starting being very provocative and then see what comes. No, but let me say with the first, let me try to answer the first question about, I mean, it's slightly resonating with what you were asking before, I think, about the essence of this world we're living in. I think was it that? So did I get it right? So it's actually the most profound spiritual question you can ask. And I'd say we are parts of a divine desire to give life. Mm-hmm. And that's ultimate reality. And we can decide to help it or to break it, which will also break ourselves. But this is there, and this is also something which is indestructible. How many bad things might arise and pass, but this divine self-realization by giving. And I mean, by giving life, that's nothing else than it's practicing love. That's what you do when you love. Mm. That's when I said love is not a feeling. It's not how you feel if something good happens to you, but love it's an activity. When you are giving life to somebody, which might be you, or the whole, or the community. I think that's actually what is happening at the center of this cosmos. It's just this. And as humans, we can see that this is happening, and we can actively accept that this is what is needed to happen and participate in this. And Bernards can't really understand this, but they just do it by flying around and having these dark blue wings with purple
freckles on them. So it's we're part of the divine desire to love, and that's something which is bigger than death. I'd say death is just a little transitory part in this. Yes. So that was part one of the question.
Yeah, and part really quickly, because one of the quotes on love that I did track from Matter and Desire that I wanted to do in this conversation was, and you mentioned it, love is not a pleasant feeling, but the practical principle of creative enlivenment.
Yeah. And I mean, if this is something which really changes things. It changes also your uncontrolled ecstasy. If you check what you're doing in those moments against the need of giving life to you and to others. I mean, it's again said that before. There's no hierarchy in this. So it's you're included, but also the others are included. And then trying to answer, coming to your question about how I incorporate this into a sort of practice. So that's actually easy, as I'm sitting with other beings. So so my way is to go outside, or it doesn't even need to be so much outside. It can be very close. It can also be the stone of the house on the other side of the street. So it happens in very tiny, on a tiny scale as well. But it's my way of prayer, maybe, is to be in the presence of beings, and throughout the years, I'd say all this has become rather transparent. So I'm kind of like always partly in this state, and it's something which, when I'm doing workshops, it's often we are living lives where we need to be asked to open up to this fertile living world all around us, but then it's quite quickly there. So I'm basically doing this, and then I'm also, and it's part of the same movement, I'm writing. So writing is the other half of my meditation, or it's the other half of my prayer, if you'd like. So I'd really say that being in a flow of words finding me, it's a sort of meditative state. So that's what I'm doing. So it's actually very simple. Mm-hmm. It's pretty simple, I'd say. But it's pretty. It's somehow part of my normal daily life. So it's simple, but it's also always there in a way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That made me think of two things. One is when I was in conversation with my friend Julianne yesterday and telling her, I was having this conversation about aliveness and tensions and talking to you today. She, I told her about Matter and Desire. I don't know when, but she bought it, which is, I can't tell you how many people I have either gifted or told to buy.
I'm really, there was a moment when it was quite high on the Amazon.com. That was probably when you were at the top of recommending it. I was thinking about it.
I don't know. It was so funny. I'm part of an online permaculture, group of people who are considering the implications of permaculture for social movement. And we were all in this social permaculture design course, I think 4 years ago. And it was funny. Someone asked what their favorite books were that spoke to some of these things. And before I even answered, someone else that was in my social permaculture design course said, well, Brandy will already say it after me, but I'll beat her to it. But Matter and Desire is one of those things. But anyway, Julianne and I were talking yesterday, and she was saying, she was remembering that she hasn't read all of it, but she was remembering just how the experience of encountering like your beautiful language and the way that you write and the stuff that you were talking about, that she then, now living in Virginia, goes to visit a river and loved that idea of the practice of, just hearing when you were talking about the sensuality of water over a rock. And that now that's just such a present idea for her, that when she goes to visit in this ritual, practice of encountering life and aliveness and a kind of a living prayer, that's something that really resonates with her. And then I've started in the last several months to do a practice in the morning where I read certain things out loud. And that to me is kind of a way of doing prayer. And one of the things I say, and the thing that I say every morning, is something to the effect of, let my work be an act of worship, and let me build a cathedral of praise out of my words and my art. That like, I want what I write and what I say to sort of be that act of living prayer. And so I really resonate with the idea that, writing and speaking and those things are part of how you are in a practice of sharing and chewing over and working with these ideas in your own life, and then sharing those with others who then can do the same.
And it's what you just said, it's important to speak it out also. So it's important to get into relationship and to talk and to actively address and to actively thank. And I mean, again, that's what we find in Kimmerer's book. It's so much of this active communication. And there's a colleague who is a member of the Lakota Nation, and he says, he asked a somewhat similar question. He said, every morning, the first thing I do is to address water. And it's so extremely simple, because the first thing or the second thing or the third thing we're doing is somehow pouring water, drinking water, pouring water for the coffee maker or whatever. So if we're not in dire conditions, we run out of water, whatever, in some desert or under a heat dome in the US Midwest. I should ask for the temperature. We were just joking about Italian temperatures, but it's probably hotter at your side. No, but I mean, it's so simple. It's so simple, but it's so absolutely needed. And it's not only needed because it is focusing our attention, it is needed because it's needed for the water itself to be addressed. And that's why I say it's important to get into relationships and to actively relate. Absolutely. So it's not only a good practice for oneself, it's needed for the world. That's what I would say. Yeah. Right.
Part of enlivenment is attention.
Yeah.
So you're attention to water.
Attention in the sense of really relating to somebody who is there. That's really important.
Yeah, it's that sort of aspect of animism also, right?
You see, that's something I wouldn't have said when I just had finished the book. That's something I say right now. What your friend is doing, she's doing something it sounded pretty animistic. It's really talking to the water, thanking the water spirit even. So thanking on a way of communication we are able to do as humans. And it does something inside of the world, something unseen but helpful.
That I actually think that science is learning actually how to measure, interestingly enough.
Probably, yes. Yeah.
Not that it's needed, but, not that that's the, there's just one other way of seeing.
Yeah. Now, if they do it well, it can't be of damage. So it will just show that good science should just acknowledge things it didn't know 10 years ago. So that's the way science should be. Unfortunately, scientists don't like their theories being turned over, and they cling to them, and schools of scientists and milieus. And so science is not as it is designed to be, actually. So it should be designed to accommodate anything which comes up and works, but unfortunately, it's not done like this.
Okay. Well, I want to say back to you, you said earlier, you expressed your gratitude, and it would be hard to overstate the amount of gratitude I have, not just for this conversation, but of course for your work. It was actually just a short anecdote to end a wild experience, because I'm just starting. This is only the first of several conversations, and I won't publish the podcast until probably about a month or so from now, when this will come out for the first time. And so I've been asking folks, to come on, and you were one of the few sort of larger authors that has really guided a lot. Charles Eisenstein is one of those. I'm hoping to be in conversation with him also soon. But, I reached out, and it was interesting because I had all written you at different times, but I had this moment the day before you responded where I just had this complete physical experience of gratitude. I was just so overcome that like the universe might actually want me to do stuff that makes me feel more alive and excited in the world. And that actually, it was actually possible that could happen, that maybe even it's inevitable. And I was so overcome by that I just broke into tears sort of on my floor, and was just sort of like, in a sheer state of like, thank you. And the next morning is when I got your email saying that you would come on. And and I was just like, this is how gratitude works, and the mysterious nature of the universe. But it just makes so much sense. And I'm grateful for what you do in the world and the conversations that you elicit, and also for being someone who has, I'm sure, done both the hard internal work of holding these tensions in your life and contradictions, and also fighting for a world that I think deeply needs to learn how to hold some of these contradictions, even if it's just between the sciences and the arts, or science and, living experience, and honoring different intelligences and ways of knowing in the world. So thank you for this chat and for all the writing that you share.
Yeah. Lovely. Yeah. No, I'm really happy, and it's a very beautiful what you tell there. So I'm really happy that it happened that way.
Whew. All right. Deep breath. Yeah. I'm not sure I'm ever going to get over the fact that I got to have that conversation with Dr. Weber. So I hope it meant anything near to you what it meant to me, and that you enjoyed that incredible conversation. You can find Andreas online at biologyofwonder.org and on Twitter at biopoetics. I'll link to both of those in the show notes, along with everything else that we talked about at thisplusThat.com/episodes. Thanks to the team, as always, at Upfire Digital for the audio processing. You can find them online at upfiredigital.com. All of my music is by the folks at slip.stream. You can find them online at that same address. I do these interviews from my home on the native land of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho people, but you can otherwise find me online at thisplusThat.com and This Plus That pod across social media, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, I think are the big ones. More importantly, if you're a plus kind of person and you love this as much as I do, you can also sign up for my newsletter there. In it, I'm going to share things like behind the scenes takes, extra tidbits from interviews like this. I write also. So in between podcasts, I write every other week about connections that I'm making to things in my own world out of my daily life. I'm also going to provide a bunch of links to idea mashing media and people that I've enjoyed recently. And I also am going to take, I just knocked on my desk. I'm also going to take, like guest recommendations. So if you know anyone else that's doing this kind of idea mashing stuff and you think I should talk to them in an interview, sign up for my newsletter. And that's where you can reply to me and tell me about those people. And I will actually respond to you. I want to hear all of your best ideas. So yeah, sign up for that at thisplusThat.com and rate this show. If you love it, rate it with 5 stars if you would, and share it with other people that you know, and make sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And yeah, I'm so glad that you're here. I want to continue having these incredible connected conversations with people who are doing this work at the intersection of stuff that is just so fascinating and poetic and lovely and I don't know, interesting and all the things. So thanks for being here. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, this has been This Plus That. I'm Brandy. Have a good one.